My name is Mia, and I am 30 years old. For years ago, my father called me 1 week before my wedding and said 6 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about the man I had spent my whole life trying to make proud. I won't be walking you down. Just that. No explanation that made sense. No apology. No acknowledgement of what those 6 words meant, that the man who had held my hand at my first day of school, who had taught me to ride a bike on a Sunday morning in our driveway, who I had loved with the specific fierce loyalty of a daughter who believes her father is the safest person in the world, had just told me he would not be there for the most important day of my life. I was standing in my kitchen, 7 days before my wedding. Invitations sent. Dress fitted. Venue booked. Flowers ordered. The entire architecture of a day I had been building for 8 months, and my father had called me on a Tuesday afternoon and removed himself from the center of it in 6 words. Why? I said. He was quiet for a moment. The specific quiet of a man who has made a decision and is now managing the delivery of it. Your mother will be there, he said. You don't need both of us. My mother and father had divorced when I was 12. 18 years ago. A divorce that had been handled the way my father handled most difficult things, by deciding what was convenient for him and presenting it as what was reasonable for everyone. This isn't about Mom, I said. She and I cannot be in the same room, he said. You know that. I know that you've chosen not to be in the same room with her for 18 years, I said. That's a choice, Dad. Not a fact. Silence. Then, and this was the part that landed like something physical. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd understand. The sentence of my entire childhood. The sentence that had followed every missed recital, every forgotten birthday, every parent-teacher evening he hadn't attended, every Sunday he was supposed to pick me up and didn't. I thought you'd understand. As if understanding were my job. As if my feelings were an inconvenience, he had generously decided I should manage on his behalf. I'll call you later, I said. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen with my hand still on the phone, and I looked at the wedding folder on my counter, thick with vendor contacts and seating charts and the small beautiful details of a day I had planned with the particular joy of someone who had always believed that family showed up when it mattered. My father had just told me family didn't show up. Not his family anyway. Not him. Something settled in my chest. Cold and clarifying. The specific feeling of a truth you have been avoiding for a very long time finally arriving and refusing to leave. I picked up the phone again. Not to call him back. To call my best friend Rachel. Because some truths need a witness before you can fully believe them yourself. I didn't call him back that night. For the first time in 30 years, I let my father's absence be his own problem instead of mine to solve. That was new. Rachel had listened to everything on the phone, all of it, the 6 words, the I thought you'd understand, the 18 years of missed recitals and forgotten birthdays compressed into a Tuesday afternoon phone call 1 week before my wedding. She had listened without interrupting, which was what I needed, and when I finished she said, Mia, how many times has he done this? I sat with the question. My whole life, I said. Yes, she said. Your whole life. My parents divorced when I was 12. I want to tell you what that looked like from the inside, not the adult retrospective version where you understand motivations and assign context, but the actual experience of being 12 and watching your family become 2 separate things that no longer fit together. My mother cried for 3 months. Quietly, privately, in the way of women who have decided their children should not carry their grief. She kept making dinner. She kept showing up to school events. She kept being present in the specific exhausting way of a parent who is falling apart and has decided that falling apart is not an option. My father moved into an apartment across town. He called every Sunday. Sometimes. The sometimes was the thing that shaped me. Not the divorce itself. I understood, even at 12, that marriages ended and that this was not the end of the world. But the sometimes. The particular uncertainty of a child who has learned that love from one of her parents is conditional on his convenience. Some Sundays the phone rang. Some Sundays it didn't. Some Sundays he picked me up as promised, and we had lunch, and he was warm and present, and the father I loved completely. Some Sundays he called at the last minute with an excuse, work, a prior commitment, something that had come up. I learned to be ready for either. That is what inconsistent love does to a child. It doesn't teach them that they are unloved. It teaches them that love is something that arrives unpredictably and must be received gratefully when it comes, because it might not come next time. It teaches them to calibrate their expectations downward. To be grateful for the Sundays that happened instead of angry about the ones that didn't. I was a very grateful child. I thought about my school play. I was 14. I had the lead, not a large production, just the school auditorium. But I had practiced for weeks and I was good, and I wanted him there with a specific intensity that I had learned to keep private because wanting things from my father too openly felt dangerous. He had promised to come. He didn't come. He called afterward. Said something had come up. Said he heard it went well. Said he was proud of me. I said thank you. I said it was fine. I filed it away. I thought about my university graduation. I was 22. 8 years after the divorce, 8 years of conditional Sundays and managed expectations. I had sent him the invitation 6 weeks in advance. He had said he would be there. He arrived an hour late. Missed the ceremony entirely. Found me afterward in the crowd, slightly breathless, a bunch of flowers purchased hurriedly from a petrol station, still in their plastic wrap. Said he had trouble parking. I had smiled. I had accepted the flowers. I had taken a photograph with him that my mother kept because I couldn't look at it. I said it was fine. It was not fine. It had never been fine. I understood that now, sitting in my kitchen a week before my wedding with a phone in my hand and 30 years of filed-away moments, finally refusing to stay filed. My fiancé, James, came home at 7. He found me at the kitchen table with the wedding folder open and untouched in front of me and the particular stillness of someone who has been sitting with something difficult for several hours. He sat down across from me. What happened? He said. I told him. James listened the way he always listened, completely, without interrupting, without immediately moving to solutions. He had learned early in our relationship that I needed to be heard before I needed to be helped, and he had never once forgotten it. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? He said. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay, giving me the space to not know without filling it with his own certainty. I looked at him across the table. At this man who showed up. Who had never once in 3 years of relationship said, I thought you'd understand, as a substitute for actually showing up. Who had driven 4 hours in a snowstorm to be at my side when my grandmother was ill. Who had remembered every birthday, not just mine, but my mother's and Rachel's, and the small anniversaries that I had mentioned once, and he had simply retained because he had been paying attention. I thought about the difference between a man who shows up and a man who makes you grateful for the times he almost does. I had spent 30 years being grateful for almost. James, I said. Yes. I'm done making excuses for him. James looked at me carefully. Not surprised, he had been watching me make excuses for my father for 3 years with the quiet patience of someone who understood this was my truth to arrive at in my own time. Okay, he said again. I mean it this time, I said. I know, he said. I can hear it. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Outside, the Tuesday evening continued. Traffic, a neighbor's dog, the ordinary sounds of a world moving through itself without any awareness of the woman at the kitchen table who had just, quietly and permanently, stopped waiting for a father who had been choosing convenience over her for 30 years. I looked at our hands. His over mine. Someone who chose me. Every day. Without conditions. Without convenience. Just chose me. I was going to remember what that felt like. And I was done accepting anything less. The 6 days before my wedding were the strangest of my life. Not because of the planning. Everything was in order, had been in order for months. The vendors confirmed and the flowers arranged and the seating chart finalized with the careful attention of someone who finds comfort in organization when everything else feels uncertain. Strange because of what I was carrying. My father had called twice since Tuesday. I had let both calls go to voicemail. He had left 2 messages, the first careful and reasonable, explaining again about my mother, about the impossibility of being in the same room, about how he hoped I understood. The second slightly less careful. A note of something underneath the reasonableness that I recognized from childhood, the particular frequency of a man who is not getting the response he expected and is recalibrating. I had not called back. My mother knew. I had told her Thursday evening, sitting in her kitchen while she made tea, her response to most of life's difficulties, and she had listened with the particular stillness of a woman who was not surprised and was trying very hard not to say so. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," she said. "Don't be sorry for him," I said. "I'm sorry for you," she said. "For the fact that you're dealing with this now. This week." I looked at my mother, this woman who had cried quietly for 3 months at 41, and then gotten up and kept making dinner, kept showing up, kept being present through 18 years of raising me largely alone while my father managed his involvement around his convenience. "Mom," I said, "did you know? When you married him, did you know he was like this?" She was quiet for a moment. "I knew he was charming," she said carefully. "I knew he was exciting. I knew he made me feel like the most important person in the room." She paused. "I didn't know that feeling was only available when it cost him nothing." I sat with that. The most important person in the room, when it cost him nothing. That was my father exactly. Warm and present when presence was easy. Disappeared when it required something. "How did you stop being angry?" I said. She looked at me. Something in her face that was old and honest. "I'm not sure I did," she said. "I think I just got tired of carrying it." She poured the tea. The anger was heavy and he wasn't worth the wait. Rachel came over Saturday, 2 days before the wedding. She arrived with wine and food and the particular energy of a best friend who has assessed that what is needed is not more processing, but simply presence, warmth, distraction, the reminder that life contains good things alongside the difficult ones. We sat on my living room floor and ate, and talked about everything except my father for 2 hours. Then Rachel said, "Are you going to tell him not to come?" I had been thinking about this all week. "He already said he's not coming," I said. "I know," she said. "But there's a difference between him choosing not to come and you telling him his choice has consequences." She looked at me carefully. "Have you ever told him that his choices have consequences?" I thought about it honestly. No. I had absorbed consequences my entire life. Had made myself the container for his inconsistency, had adjusted, accommodated, filed things away, and shown up the next Sunday ready to be grateful for whatever version of him arrived. I had never once turned it around. Never said, "Your choice to not show up has a cost." Not to you. To me. And I am done paying it. "No," I said. "Maybe it's time," Rachel said. I called my father Sunday morning, one day before my wedding. He answered immediately, the speed of a man who has been waiting, which was itself something. My father was not usually a waiter. He was usually the one who made others wait. "Mia," he said. Relieved. "Dad," I said. "I'm not calling to change your mind. I'm calling to tell you something." A pause. "Okay. Your choice not to come tomorrow is your choice," I said. "I'm not going to beg you. I'm not going to negotiate. But I need you to understand this is not something I'm going to file away. This is not something I'm going to call fine. Tomorrow is the most important day of my life, and you have chosen not to be there because being there requires you to be uncomfortable for one afternoon." I stopped. "I want you to know that I see that choice clearly. And after tomorrow, things between us are going to be different." Silence. "What does that mean?" he said. "It means I'm done adjusting myself to fit around your convenience," I said. "It means the relationship we have going forward will be honest or it won't exist." He was quiet for a long moment. "I love you, Mia," he said finally. "I know you do," I said. "In the way you're capable of. But I need more than the love you're capable of. And I'm done pretending I don't. I hung up. I sat in my apartment the morning before my wedding and felt something move through me, not grief, not anger. Something cleaner than both. The particular freedom of a woman who has finally said the true thing. My wedding day arrived clear and cold and beautiful. October morning, the sky the particular blue that only exists in autumn, sharp and certain, the trees along the venue drive turned to gold and amber. I stood at the window of the bridal suite at 7 in the morning in my robe with coffee in my hand and looked at it and felt, underneath everything, a quiet joy that surprised me with its completeness. I had expected the day to be shadowed. Instead, it was luminous. Rachel was there from 6. She had slept at the venue, had organized the morning with the cheerful efficiency of a woman who loves logistics and loves me in equal measure. My mother arrived at 7:30, still in her coat, eyes bright, carrying pastries she had made herself because she baked when she was emotional, and she had apparently been very emotional. She hugged me at the door. "You look like yourself," she said. Which was the best thing she could have said. The morning moved the way mornings do when they have been carefully planned, hair and makeup and the small rituals of preparation, Rachel managing timelines with a clipboard she had made herself. My mother sitting in the corner of the suite, alternately crying and eating her own pastries with the emotional range of a woman feeling everything and making no effort to contain it. My phone buzzed at 9. My father. A text this time. "I'm outside. If you want me there, I'm here. If not, I understand. Either way, I love you." I read it 3 times. I showed it to Rachel. She read it. Looked at me. Said nothing, understanding that this was not hers to decide. I showed it to my mother. She read it. Something complicated moved across her face. Then she looked at me with the clear eyes of a woman who has spent 18 years having opinions about this man and has decided that today, of all days, her opinion was not what mattered. "What do you want?" she said. I sat with the question. What did I want? Not what was right. Not what was fair. Not what sent the correct message or maintained the appropriate boundary or demonstrated that his choices had consequences. What did I, Mia, want on my wedding day? I wanted my father to walk me down the aisle. Not the father he had been, inconsistent, convenient, the man who had made me an expert in managing disappointment. But the father I had loved at 6 and 8 and 12 before I understood the terms of his love. The man who had held my hand on my first day of school. Who had taught me to ride a bike. That man was outside. Imperfect and late, and having arrived only after I had said the true thing on the phone the day before. But outside. I texted back, "Come in. Room 4. He knocked 5 minutes later. I opened the door. He was in a suit, a good one, clearly chosen carefully. His hair was neat. He looked older than I remembered and also, somehow, uncertain in a way I had never seen on him before. The confidence that had always been his default setting was present but different, quieter, chastened. He looked at me in my dress. His eyes filled. "Mia," he said. "Just my name. Everything in it." "You're here," I said. "I'm here," he said. I should have said that from the beginning. "I'm sorry." I looked at my father for a long moment. At this complicated, inconsistent, genuinely loving in his limited way man who had shaped me by his presence and his absence in equal measure. "You can walk me down the aisle," I said. "But we're going to talk. After. Really talk." He nodded. Immediately. "No negotiation." "Whatever you need," he said. I stepped back to let him in. My mother looked up from the corner. Their eyes met across the room. 18 years of complicated history in that look, pain and time, and the particular weariness of people who have been each other's wound for a long time. Then my mother nodded. Once. Small and dignified. My father nodded back. Not warmth, they would never have warmth. But something. A recognition. An acknowledgement that today was not about them. Today was about me. Finally. Today was about me. The ceremony was everything. Not perfect, nothing real is perfect. The florist had substituted one type of flower for another, and the substitution was visible if you knew what you were looking for. James's best man forgot the rings for approximately 45 seconds that felt like 400 years. It rained briefly, beautifully, for exactly 3 minutes during the outdoor portion, and then stopped as if it had been scheduled. Everything and imperfect and completely, utterly mine. My father walked me down the aisle. I had been uncertain how it would feel, whether the history would shadow the moment, whether I would be thinking about the phone call and the 6 words and 30 years of managed disappointment instead of the man beside me and the man waiting at the end of the aisle. I was not thinking about any of that. I was thinking about my father's hand on mine. About the specific warmth of it, the hand that had held mine on my first day of school, that had steadied the back of my bicycle seat, that had been present in the moments that mattered most and absent in so many others. Present today. He had chosen, finally, to be present. That was not everything. It was not the 30 years of choosing otherwise undone. It was not absolution or resolution or the ending of anything complicated. But it was something. I squeezed his hand once before he placed mine in James's. He squeezed back. Then he sat down. And I turned to the man who had never once made me feel like an afterthought, and I got married with the autumn light coming through the venue windows, and my mother crying in the front row, and Rachel holding it together magnificently until the vows started and then not holding it together at all. The reception was warm and loud and full. At some point in the evening my father found me. Not the urgent finding of a man with something to manage, the quiet finding of someone who has been waiting for the right moment. He touched my arm gently and I turned and he said, "Can we find somewhere quieter for a few minutes?" We found a small anteroom off the main hall. Sat down across from each other with the noise of the party muffled behind the closed door. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then at me. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what you said on the phone yesterday. About choosing convenience." He stopped. "You were right. I have been doing that. For a very long time." I waited. "I don't have a good explanation," he said. "I have reasons. The divorce was harder than I showed. Being around your mother brought things up that I didn't know how to handle. It was easier to call than to show up. But reasons aren't excuses, and I know that." "No," I said. "They're not." "I miss things," he said. "Important things. The play. The graduation. Things I can't go back to." He looked at me directly. "I don't want to miss anything else." I sat with that. "That's going to require different behavior," I said. "Not promises. Behavior." "I know," he said. "Consistent behavior," I said. "Not when it's convenient. When it's required." "I know," he said again. "I want to try." I looked at my father, this man I had loved and been disappointed by and learned to manage and finally, this week, spoken the truth to. This imperfect man sitting across from me on my wedding day, saying I want to try with the uncertain sincerity of someone who means it and knows that meaning it is only the beginning. "Okay," I said. "Try." We went back to the party. James found me immediately, his particular radar for where I was in any room, the way he always knew. "Okay," he said quietly. "Yes," I said. He took my hand. We danced. And outside the autumn night settled over everything, over the venue and the golden trees and the life that was beginning, imperfectly and honestly and entirely mine. My father tried. I want to say that clearly because it matters, because the story of a difficult parent is not always the story of someone who never changes. Sometimes it is the story of someone who changes late, imperfectly, with the particular effort of a person dismantling habits built over decades. My father tried. He called every week. Not sometimes, every week, Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, regular as a standing appointment. The calls were not always easy. We were learning a new language together, the language of honest conversation between two people who had spent 30 years communicating through managed disappointment and filed-away moments. But they happened. Every week. Without exception. He came to James and my first anniversary dinner, drove 3 hours to be there, arrived on time, brought wine he had researched rather than flowers grabbed at a petrol station. He sat across from us at dinner and asked real questions about our life and listened to the answers with the focused attention of a man who has decided that attention is what he owes. He called on my birthday, not to tell me about something else, not to pivot to his own news, to say happy birthday and ask how I was and mean it. The first time it happened, I sat with the phone after we hung up and felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness exactly. Not yet. But something adjacent, the tentative opening of a door that I had been keeping firmly closed for protection and was now, cautiously, allowing the smallest amount of light through. James noticed the change. "He's different," he said one evening. We were making dinner together, the easy, comfortable ritual of two people who have learned each other's rhythms. "Yes," I said. "How does that feel?" I thought about it honestly. "Strange," I said. "Good and strange. Like, I spent so long adjusting to who he was that I don't quite know what to do with who he's trying to be." James nodded. He understood this, the disorientation of someone changing a pattern you had organized your entire psychology around. "Dr. Keller," he said. Dr. Keller was my therapist. I had started seeing her 2 months after the wedding, not because I was falling apart, but because I had spent 30 years developing coping mechanisms for a difficult relationship, and I wanted to examine those mechanisms properly rather than simply replacing one set with another. "She says it's normal," I said. "The disorientation." She says when someone we've categorized as unreliable starts being reliable, our nervous system doesn't immediately trust it. "Makes sense," James said. "She also says," I stopped. "She says I've been managing my relationship with my father so long that I don't fully know what I want from it. What an honest version of it looks like." "What do you want?" James said. Same question Rachel had asked. Same question my mother had asked on my wedding morning. "What do you want, Mia?" "I want a father," I said simply. "A real one. Not perfect. Just present. Consistently, genuinely present." "Tell him that," James said. "I know," I said. "I'm working up to it." I told him in March. 6 months after the wedding. Sunday call, 11 o'clock. We had been talking for 20 minutes about ordinary things, his work, our apartment, a film we had both seen. And then I said, "Dad, I want to tell you something." "Okay," he said. Immediately attentive. "What you've been doing since the wedding, the calls, the visits, the birthday, it matters. I want you to know that it matters." Silence. The quiet of someone receiving something they weren't certain was coming. "I also want to tell you what I want," I said. Not as a demand. Just, honestly. I want a father who shows up. Who chooses me not when it's convenient, but because I matter. I want to be able to call you with good news and bad news and know you'll answer. I paused. I want what James has with his father. I don't know if we can get there, but I want to try if you do. My father was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, stripped of the usual ease. "That's all I've ever wanted to be," he said. I didn't know how to be it without your mother being a reason not to be." He stopped. "That's not an excuse. I know that. I'm saying it so you understand that it was never about you. It was never because you didn't matter." "I know that now," I said. "I'm learning to know that. Mia." His voice very quiet. "I'm sorry. For all of it. The play. The graduation. The phone call before your wedding. A pause. For all the Sundays. The Sundays." He knew about the Sundays. He had known all along. "I accept that," I said. "And I want to move forward." "So do I," he said. We stayed on the phone for another hour. Just talking. Father and daughter. Learning, finally, what that actually meant. Summer arrived, and with it the first real test. My father called in June with news. He was getting remarried. A woman named Patricia he had been seeing for 2 years, which meant he had been seeing her without mentioning her for 2 years, which was itself information about the pace at which he allowed people into the parts of his life that felt vulnerable. I noted that. I did not make it a confrontation. "Tell me about her," I said. He told me about her warmly, with the particular softness of a man talking about someone who makes him happy. Patricia was a teacher. 61. Twice divorced herself, 2 adult children who lived out of state. She liked hiking and terrible television and made extraordinary soup. She sounds lovely, I said. She is, he said. I'd like you to meet her. I'd like that too, I said. We met in July. Lunch, a restaurant my father had chosen carefully. Patricia was not what I expected, though I hadn't quite known what I expected. Small, warm, with the direct gaze of someone who has learned through experience to look at things clearly. She looked at me clearly. Your father talks about you constantly, she said. Not as flattery, as information. Does he? I said. Constantly, she said. The wedding. The calls. What you said to him the day before. She looked at me steadily. He's a different person since then. I want you to know that. I looked at my father across the table. He was watching me with the careful attention of a man waiting to see how this landed. I'm glad, I said. And meant it. The second test was harder. August. My father canceled a visit, work emergency, genuine from what I could tell, the kind of thing that could not be rescheduled. But the cancellation arrived the day before. 24 hours notice. Old pattern. New circumstances. I sat with it for a day. Then I called him. Dad, I said. The cancellation, I understand it was genuine. But I need you to know that last-minute changes are something I'm sensitive to. Because of history. I know, he said immediately. I'm sorry. It won't become a pattern. I need it not to, I said. Simply. Without drama. It won't, he said. He rescheduled within the week. Drove the 3 hours. Arrived on time. I noticed. I told him I noticed. Thank you for coming, I said when he arrived. He looked at me with something in his eyes that was not quite guilt anymore, something further along than guilt. Something that looked like a man who has understood the cost of what he did and has decided that understanding it is not enough, that action is required, and who is taking that action one rescheduled visit at a time. Of course, he said. 2 words. The words of a man for whom of course was becoming true rather than aspirational. Small. Significant. Real. Dr. Keller asked me in September how I was feeling about my father. I thought about it carefully. Cautiously hopeful, I said. Which is different from hopeful. Hopeful is what I was for 30 years, the automatic optimism of someone who keeps expecting the pattern to change without any evidence that it will. I paused. Cautiously hopeful means I'm watching the evidence. And the evidence is getting better. What would it take, she said, to move from cautious hope to something more settled? I thought about it. Time, I said. Consistency over time. Not 6 months. Not a year. Several years of him showing up, of the calls happening, of him choosing me when it costs him something. I paused. And I think I need to let myself receive it. That's the part I'm still working on. Every time he shows up, I'm waiting for the other shoe. For the Sunday he doesn't call. For the visit he cancels. That's trauma response, Dr. Keller said. Your nervous system learned a pattern. It's updating slowly. Yes, I said. Be patient with it, she said. I was learning to be patient. With him. With myself. With the slow, unglamorous work of 2 people relearning a relationship that had been built on an unstable foundation and was now, brick by brick, being rebuilt on something more honest. It was not fast. It was not linear. But it was real. And real was all I had ever actually needed. Autumn came back around. 1 year since the wedding. 1 year since the 6 words and the phone call and the text message outside the venue and my father walking me down the aisle with his hand warm over mine. 1 year of Sunday calls and rescheduled visits and Patricia's soup, which I had now eaten 3 times, and which was genuinely extraordinary. 1 year of cautious hope accumulating evidence. 1 year of Dr. Keller and James and Rachel and the slow patient work of a woman examining the patterns she had built around a difficult love and choosing which ones to keep. I kept the ones that served me. Released the ones that didn't. Work had changed. I was an event planner, had been for 7 years, the kind of work that suited someone who found comfort in making beautiful things happen for other people. I was good at it. Had been good at it quietly, in the way I had been good at most things thoroughly, reliably, without requiring much acknowledgement. In the year since the wedding, I had stopped being quietly good. I had taken on a partner, a woman named Claire who had been in the industry longer than me and brought connections I didn't have. We had pitched for a contract together in February that was the largest either of us had attempted. I had presented our proposal with the particular calm confidence of someone who has been practicing saying me without apology in other areas of her life and has discovered that the practice transfers. We got the contract. By autumn, our partnership had doubled its revenue. Claire said to me over lunch one day, "You're different from when we first met." "How so?" I said. "You used to apologize for your ideas before anyone had a chance to respond to them," she said. "You don't do that anymore." I thought about that. About the filing away. The managed disappointment. The 30 years of adjusting myself to fit around someone else's convenience. And the year of choosing not to, of saying true things to my father and me in boardrooms, and no when no is the right answer. "No," I said. "I don't." James and I talked about children in October. Not a new conversation. We had circled it before, acknowledged that we both wanted them, agreed that the timing was something we would know when we knew. But October brought it into focus. I lay awake one night thinking about it. About what kind of parent I wanted to be. About the patterns I had inherited and the ones I had chosen and the difference between the two. About my father's Sundays, the ones that happened and the ones that didn't, and the specific commitment I had made, somewhere in the year, to never be the parent whose presence was conditional. I would show up. Not perfectly, but consistently. Every time. I would be the parent who answered. My father came for the anniversary. 1 year since the wedding. He brought Patricia and wine and arrived exactly on time and sat at our table and asked real questions and listened to the answers, and at one point during dinner looked at James and said, quietly and directly, "Thank you for taking care of her." James looked at him. "She takes care of herself," he said. "I just get to be there while she does it." My father looked at me. Something in his eyes that was layered, pride and grief, and the particular expression of a man who understands what he missed and is watching someone else see it clearly. "Yes," he said. "She does." I looked at these two men across my dinner table. The one who had taught me, through his absence, what I needed. The one who had shown me, through his presence, what love actually looked like. Both of them mine. In their different ways. Shaped by different choices. I thought about my mother at home, making tea, having declined the anniversary dinner gracefully. "This one is yours, sweetheart," and being present in her own way from across the city. I thought about Rachel, who had texted that morning, "Happy anniversary. You picked a good one." Both of them. I thought about Dr. Keller, who had said last week, "You're doing the work." I can see it in everything. I looked at my life. At the table and the wine and the man beside me and the father across from me attempting, genuinely, to be something better than he had been. At the woman I had built from the material of 30 years of managed disappointment, strong and clear-eyed and done with apology. I raised my glass. Spring came in the second year. My father called on a Wednesday. Not Sunday, Wednesday, which was new. He had been expanding the calls, I had noticed. Testing whether more frequent contact was welcome. Finding that it was. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "Okay," I said. "Patricia and I set a date," he said. "September. Small ceremony, just family and close friends." A pause. "I want you there. I want you to know that you are the first person I called." I sat with that. The first person he called. "I'd be honored," I said. Another pause. Longer. Then, "Mia, I've been going to therapy." I hadn't expected that. "Since when?" I said. "Since November," he said. "Patricia suggested it." I resisted for about 3 weeks and then went because I realized I had been resisting things that were good for me my entire life, and I was tired of it. I thought about my father in a therapist's office. Sitting across from someone the way I sat across from Dr. Keller. Being asked the questions that went below the surface. Examining the patterns. "How is it?" I said. "Hard," he said. "Useful." A pause. "My therapist asked me last week what I was most ashamed of." I said, "Missing your school play." He stopped. She asked why that specifically. I said, because you never once made me feel how much it hurt. You just absorbed it. And I let you. Because it was easier. I pressed my hand flat against my kitchen counter. Dad, I said. I know, he said. I know it doesn't change it. I wanted you to know that I know. That I've always known, somewhere underneath, and I chose convenience anyway. His voice was rough. I'm sorry. I will keep being sorry for a very long time. I stood in my kitchen in the spring morning with the window open and the city sounds coming in and my father's voice on the phone saying the things I had needed him to say for 30 years. Thank you, I said. For going. For telling me. Thank you, he said. For giving me the chance to. We talked for an hour. At the end, he said, I love you, Mia. Not as punctuation. Not as the automatic closing of a call. As a complete sentence. Delivered with the full weight of what it meant. I love you too, Dad, I said. And I meant it, complicated and cautious and growing and real. I found out I was pregnant in April. Standing in my bathroom at 6 in the morning with James still asleep. 2 lines on a test I had bought the day before with the particular mixture of hope and terror of someone who wants something very much and is afraid of what wanting it that much means. 2 lines. I sat on the edge of the bathtub. Put my hand on my stomach. Such an ordinary gesture. Such a completely insufficient response to the size of what I was feeling. I went back to the bedroom. Stood in the doorway looking at James sleeping, this man who showed up, who had driven 3 hours in a snowstorm, who had said she takes care of herself. I just get to be there with the complete sincerity of someone who believed it. I sat on the edge of the bed. He opened his eyes, looked at me, then at the test in my hand. He sat up slowly. Mia, he said, in a voice I had never heard from him before. Yes, I said. He reached for me. And I leaned in all the way in, without the managed distance of someone who has learned to hold part of herself back just in case. All the way in. 1 year becomes 2 becomes the shape of a life. I want to tell you what that looks like, not the curated version, not the summary that makes everything seem resolved and certain. The real version. Because the real version is the one that might mean something to you. 2 years after my wedding, my father walked into the hospital room where I had just given birth to a daughter and stood in the doorway looking at her with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not the managed warmth. Not the convenient affection. Something total. Something that had no performance in it at all. He crossed the room. I placed her in his arms. He held her the way people hold things they are afraid of dropping, with complete attention, complete care. Hello, he said to her. Quietly. Just the 2 of them already. I watched my father hold my daughter and felt something move through me that I didn't try to name. Some things are bigger than words. He looked up at me. What's her name? He said. James and I had decided weeks ago. Eleanor, I said. We're calling her Ellie. My father's eyes filled. He looked back at her. Hello, Ellie, he said. Patricia became someone I loved. Not immediately, love of that kind doesn't arrive immediately. It accumulates through shared meals and honest conversations, and the slow revelation of a person over time. But she accumulated into someone I loved genuinely. She loved my father in a way that made him better. Not because she fixed him, nobody fixes anybody, but because she saw him clearly and expected him to live up to what she saw. And he did. Imperfectly, consistently, he did. Their wedding in September was small and warm. I stood beside my father while he made his vows, new vows, this time meaning them differently, with the particular weight of a man who has done the work of understanding what he is promising. He cried. I had never seen my father cry before. It was the most honest thing I had ever seen from him. I want to say something to you now. If you are watching this and you recognize something in Mia's story, the father who loved you in the way that was convenient, the Sunday calls that sometimes didn't come, the graduation he was late to, the wedding he almost missed, I want you to say this clearly. His limitations were not your fault. His inconsistency was not a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of his capacity. And capacity can be developed slowly, with the right circumstances and the right pressure, and sometimes the right person saying the true thing on the phone the day before a wedding. But here is what I need you to hear most. You do not have to wait for him to develop it. You are allowed to build your life fully and completely without waiting for a difficult parent to become the parent you needed. You are allowed to find your James, your person who shows up without conditions. You are allowed to find your Rachel, your mother, your Dr. Keller. You are allowed to build chosen family around the gaps that biological family left. And then, if your father calls, if he tries, if he shows up imperfectly and sincerely, you are allowed to let him in. Cautiously. With evidence required. With your boundaries intact and your self-respect non-negotiable. You are allowed to have both. The life you built without him. And the relationship you rebuild with him. They're not mutually exclusive. I spent 30 years being the daughter who understood. Who filed things away. Who said it's fine when it wasn't fine. Who made herself smaller to fit around someone else's convenience. I spent the last 2 years being myself. Fully, clearly, without apology. Standing in my own life, my work, my marriage, my daughter, my father who is trying, my mother who never stopped, and feeling, for the first time, that it fits. Not because everything is resolved. Because I stopped waiting for resolution and started living. That is the whole secret. That is all of it. Stop waiting. Start living. The life that fits is the one you build while you're done waiting for permission. Build it. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps more people find these stories when they need them most. Have you ever had a difficult relationship with your father? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. Tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing how far these stories reach. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. I have linked some of my favorites there. Until next time, stop waiting. Start living.